Okay, welcome to Switch Your Sitch with your host, Katie Turner. Super pumped. I've got Jahan Kalanter. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Nailed it.
I met Jahan when I owned the pod, co-founded the Pod Hub with Liam Zolo. Jahan has a massive experience in the legal framework. He's a lawyer, he's a TEDx speaker, he's an entrepreneur, a university lecturer. I am enthralled with CSI, Law and Order. So I know that you deal with serious crime and also the mental health space. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let you elaborate on, firstly, how you got into law and also why you specialize in this area. Welcome, Jahan.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie. I'm really excited to speak with you today about some of this stuff. And it's a great question because everyone asks, well, why did you become a criminal lawyer? And the answer is your practice sort of finds you. So I was, before I became a lawyer, I was a banker for several years. And in that space, I did a lot of compliance. I did a lot of regulatory work. And I thought when I went into private practice, that was the kind of work that would come my way. And I was naive because why would a bank that has squillions of dollars pay a junior barrister to oversee cases? They can afford the top representation. So I kind of was in this weird stage where I had no work and I had no one who would give me work that I knew how to do. But legal aid took pity on me, and a couple of other solicitors took pity on me, started giving me criminal matters. And because I had time, and what really will win a case is time, I started getting some really good results, and it sort of just evolved from there. So I never set out to be a criminal lawyer. I sort of fell into it, but it was never something that was my North Star, like some people.
Some people. And did it interest you when you got into it, or was
Absolutely. I was fascinated by it, but I never thought I'd be able to make a living doing it. It's one of those things where there's this I guess belief that if you're a criminal lawyer, you have to sacrifice your personal life, you have to sacrifice all of this, financial security, all sorts of stuff to have that job. And it's true to an extent, but it's so rewarding. And being able to, I guess, relate to people, understand why people did the things that they did, has sort of transformed or become what my big, hairy, audacious goal is. It's what I'm about.
Right. And can I ask you, like, I'm now a mum, and my biggest thing is in ensuring that children have an emotional blueprint adjustment. Like they are, because I've heard that by the time they're 5, if that blueprint isn't sealed and delivered, that's when a lot of this criminality can actually evolve.
Yeah, it's very tough. I've never met a person who's committed a crime. I don't like calling them crooks or criminals. I find that label just perpetuates the behavior, but I've never met someone who's committed a crime who doesn't have at least one secret that absolutely breaks your heart when you hear it. And we as a society are quick to write off people who've done something wrong. We're quick to forget all of the good stuff they've done and basically label them by the worst thing they possibly could have done. And sometimes that's justified, but most of the time it's not. And I think that good parenting and having a strong role model in your life, doesn't need to be a parent, but everyone who's succeeded has had at least one adult who really cared about them. Yeah. And if you can do that as a parent, that's the most powerful thing you can do to spread kindness and joy and help the world's worries.
And this, I feel like the serious crime, and you deal with mental health. Firstly, you're TEDx speaker. You did your TEDx talk on being sorry or how to be sorry. Can you elaborate on that? Because wow, firstly, TEDx is massive. I listen to their podcast. I love it. How did it evolve, and why did you talk about this?
So I was selected for TEDx through a non-traditional process. They basically did a call out for content, and I was sitting in my office that day, and I was actually, it's weird how the world works, because I was meant to have an appointment, but it didn't come. So I had an hour, and I was just thinking, well, what am I really good at? Because there's nothing that I'm particularly special at. And all of those TEDx people they've done something quite extraordinary. And the only thing I could think of is that I say sorry for a living. Like that is essentially what a criminal lawyer does, because 80% of matters will resolve in some sort of guilty plea. And pleading guilty is always an exercise in showing the court that you're remorseful for what you did, along with a few other things. So I've done so much of that I thought, you know what, if gun to my head, I could do a pretty good job of this. And I made a small piece of content. And that led to a pitch night. I attended that pitch night. It went really well. And from there, they kind of started working with me. And it was the awesome team at TED that really helped tease the idea out, because it was started as something else, but together we got it to where it came from and where it was ultimately presented. It was just an amazing opportunity. But I think it's that thinking piece of what am I really, really good at? And it's saying sorry. That's just fundamentally what a good criminal lawyer can do, is explain, yes, you did this bad thing, but the reason you did it is this.
Of that. And it's something I think in today's society has gone out the window, right? Is accountability, is actually remorse, of understanding that your actions cause consequences. Like, I'm a big believer in this.
I am too. I think that's the thing that people don't understand. And sometimes I'm shocked. Like, I have adults who are even older than I am, and they've never been held accountable for they've never had consequences for the way they've behaved. Now, you can do whatever you like, but there's a consequence to that. And if we can inform people before they make the decision, here are the consequences, and they still choose to do the wrong thing, so be it. But what really breaks my heart is there's a lot of people who never, ever learned that there are consequences. And they've behaved in abhorrent ways. And it's about, I guess, that accountability piece. Like you said, it's about making people aware that you do you, but if you do you in a way that's not okay with the rest of us, there's going to be a price.
I love that, because one of my mantras is that there is no rules as long as you can live with the consequences, right?
Absolutely.
You make the rules up as long as your ethics, your morals can deal with what the repercussions of that is. So, and
there's always there's always a price to pay for taking the easy route, and the easy route could be being deceitful. It could be, it could be dishonesty, it could be trickery, it could be laziness, but there's always a price to pay. It always comes back with interest. And I think that accountability piece teaches people that it's, in the long run, much better to be forthright, honest, do what you say you'll do, because you don't have to pay that interest. And that interest is steep.
It definitely is. And you talk about resilience and empathy as being really important traits. Do you think, and I know that your Persian background, first generation, second generation, was it your parents who came here?
I'm the first generation. So my parents came here when they were about my age, or a little bit younger than I was. And I can't even imagine how hard that would have been.
And do you think that mentality comes from that migrant background of hard work? It is obviously a lot of these migrants came here not even speaking English. They've come from war-torn areas. They've had to work from the bottom up. They had no welfare, nothing given to them.
I think very much so. I mean, my parents were both educated. They're both doctors. They spoke English. They came here, but the way the system was structured, they had to re-qualify. So they had to do everything again. They had to do that in a different country where they didn't know the culture, the norms, and they had to do it with the young child. Like, I'm perpetually amazed by them, because I don't know if I had the same audacity and the same resilience that they had. And what was instilled in me from a very young age is that we're here in Australia by choice, and we're guests. So it's kind of like when you're at someone else's house and you're behaving like a guest, which is in some ways really a great ethos to have. And in some ways, it also makes you feel like a bit of an outsider. That idea that we're a guest and we're here and we're going to be doing the dishes. We're going to be cooking the food. Like, we're not just going to be passive guests here. We've got something to prove. That sort of sat with me. And my parents are some of the most hardworking people you'll ever meet. And that ethos has definitely carried over to me. And the great thing about Australia is it is just such a country filled with opportunity. It's unfathomable. Like, in the rest of the world, there's working poor, and working poor is this concept that was foreign to me till I traveled and I saw it with my own eyes. These are people who work 16, 18, 20 hours a day, difficult, stressful jobs, physically demanding, mentally demanding, and they're still poor. That's not possible here in Australia. If you work 16, 18, 20 hours a day, you do that enough days in a row, you will have a pretty great life that you can be very proud of. Whereas for most people, that's just not a possibility.
I couldn't agree more. Like, we live in an unprecedented land of opportunity. Like, you can go and get a degree for free. You can do any education for free. You may have to pay it back, but you can get an apprentice. You can apprenticeship. You can start. Anybody that says to me, I can't do it or whatever, Yeah, it is hard to empathize. I was brought up by a single mother, two girls, no money. It was hard from get-go, and watched her work days and then scrubbed toilets on the weekends, to put herself through university so that she could provide better for us. And, once you have that role model, I think anything's possible.
Absolutely. And I think the problem is that for a lot of people, they never had that role model. Like they were told that, this is as good as it gets, take it or leave it. And those people sometimes go on to commit crimes, and those people sometimes go on to be judged. And it's very hard when you're hearing their stories. Katie, one of the things that amazes me is the amount of people who've never had a word of encouragement said to them in their entire lives, and no one's ever taken an interest in their story till I came along and talked to them. I'll never forget, I was representing this older guy. He was in his 40s, and it was very hard for him because I told him, look, he had very serious charges. I said, you need to write an apology letter. You need to get references. And he couldn't find a single person to say something nice about him. Now, imagine being in your mid-40s and having lived such a life that was not possible. But he wrote an apology letter, and it was filled with spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes. And he was just so torn up, and it took him a long time to do it. And he gave it to me, and I said, you've done such a good job. I'm proud of you. And he started crying because no one had ever told him in his entire life that they were proud of him. And I just think, you know what? If someone had said that to him at 4, he wouldn't be dealing with me at 40.
100%. When I was a lecturer at the Fitness Institute, actually, I had prison officers coming in to do their personal training course. And some of the stories, juvenile prisoner, and he was telling me a story where one of the children had been thrown through a plate glass window in a garage for his parents who were drug addicted at the age of 3 to get cigarettes and money, like breaking a 3-year-old through a plate. I mean, that's something I could never understand. I've never had to. But, that must breed a pathway for it to be very hard to break that model.
What is, that 3-year-old, if people don't understand, that's what children think is normal. And they start to model what they think is normal. Even if we have unhealthy patterns, we model them. So it's I do a lot of advocacy on this issue. I believe that if we can teach people that feelings can be mentioned and they can be managed, that we will be transforming people's capacity for the lives they will ultimately live, because a lot of pain and a lot of suffering goes unspoken. And if it's spoken about, if it's dealt with, it doesn't need to manifest into actions that really destroy lives.
Yeah, I think that's really important is understanding, because a lot of people expect you to just, how are you? I'm okay, and move on. It's the Aussie thing is to, I'm okay, I'm fine, and move on. Even at my daughter's school, they're 7, and they give them a chart now into zones: yellow zone, blue zone, red zone, green zone. And red zone's feeling angry, and yellow zone is feeling frustrated. So they ask them, what zone are you in? To understand how their emotions affect their mood.
That's awesome. And I think it's great that that's sort of being done. I was always taught stiff upper lip, don't talk about your feelings, don't talk about your emotions. And honestly, it was doing this role that sort of changed that, because a lot of times I'll be interviewing someone and I need to make them seem sympathetic to the court. And to do that, I really need to tease out from them some vulnerability, some authenticity. And I had to have the chat so many times where, look, today's not the day to be brave. Today's the day to be, you're singing for your supper, be vulnerable with me, be honest with me so that I can help you, because today's not the day to be brave. And through that process, they would ask me, okay, well, if I'm going to be asking, what do you know about it? What do you know about this? And eventually I started realizing, well, you know what? I have to answer those questions, because if I'm asking them to be vulnerable with me, I have to be vulnerable with them. So I think that's where the empathy piece comes in that you mentioned earlier. I don't think you can do my job well unless you genuinely care about and like people, and that you genuinely want to help people. If you don't want to genuinely help people, this isn't the role for you. And that's fine, because the world's filled with roles. Everybody will find their space and their niche. There's many roles, in fact, where the empathy I have would actually be horrific and would be a detriment. So it's something that I'm quite passionate about, but I think that even if you're not going to be particularly actively empathetic, you need to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, if for no other reason than because if you don't do so, you're going to go through life in a pretty angry, bitter, reactive way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great way to do it. You're in the business of people still, right?
I'm in the service industry. I mean, it's everyone forgets that, but the only difference between my firm and the one down the street is that the people within it, and I'm it's a service industry. I'm no different than a lot of service industries, and it's that's what professionals are. So if you can't relate to people, then service industries are not for you.
Go to data. Go to data. I tell people, if you can't
Exactly.
relate to people, stick with the data. So another question, what if you know somebody's guilty and you have to present them as innocent? Like, is this an ethical, does it morally stuff your conscience? How do you?
This is the question I'm asked the most, and I answer it the same way. One, I'm not God, I'm not omniscient, and I'm not omnipotent. I don't know anything for sure. If somebody tells me they didn't do it, I will tell them, look, the evidence suggests strongly that you did. And if they still say I didn't do it, then I will follow that to its right conclusion. That being said, I will often encourage my clients to tell me the truth, and I've never represented someone that I know to be guilty. If they tell me, yes, I'm guilty, but I want you to say I'm not guilty, then my options are limited. So, for example, I can't say you weren't there. I can't say someone else did it. What I can say is that the prosecution can't prove beyond reasonable doubt that you are guilty. And that's a very different argument, and it's a much more nuanced argument, and it's an argument I don't suggest anyone try to run.
And that's the difference between the judicial system here in Australia and overseas, or in America predominantly. Here you're innocent until you're proven guilty, and in America it's the other way around, right?
No, they still are innocent until proven guilty. Yeah. There's a presumption of innocence there. There's certain countries where I don't think that's the case. Like I think France and Indonesia, there's a presumption of guilt. But it's a powerful thing that we are presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. It's so fundamental that people take it for granted. Like, you don't have to prove anything. In any case, the police, the prosecution have to prove everything. And that's because you're not guilty. You're not guilty. You don't have to talk to them, because why would an innocent person have to talk to someone? So there's all of these really powerful safeguards that the common law system has, which just amaze me every day. It's amazing that there's this system called the law that binds us all together and that allows people in all different walks of life to make sure that contracts are honored, to make sure people walk safely down the streets. I love it. I can talk about it endlessly.
So the other thing that we've chatted about on offline, and something I'm passionate about, is education and the role of it. I interviewed Dr. Munjed Al-Muderis, and he's a huge advocate for education, coming from a refugee background as well. And he really thinks that this is how not only you empower people, but also how you can change your life. So take it away. I mean, I know you did a post, and 100% agree with you about it, about how education, people think about it as being the be all and end all for that profession, but really it builds the foundations, is what you're saying.
The irony with most professions is that by the time that you leave your formal apprenticeship, the world has changed so much that a lot of the stuff you learned is worthless. Mm-hmm. For example, when I was in law school, there was no such thing as Bitcoin. I mean, there was, but it wasn't a big deal. No one really knew about it. It was super, super future tech. Same-sex marriage was not an option. The law hadn't reached that stage yet. And certainly identity politics were not anywhere near they were. You know, I was never taught about they, them, he, she.
That's right.
These various pronouns. And it's funny that if you leave law school thinking I know everything, day one, you're already out of it. Because I, for example, have all of these young associates who know so much more than me. They will come and they'll tell me about things like blockchain. They'll tell me about things like data hacking. They'll tell me something about big data. And what the education system fails to do, in my opinion, and it fails greatly, is that it teaches people that all you have to do is get to the next step. So you get the shiny object. The shiny object is you get your credits and your distinctions, and then you get your test data, and then you get your degree, and then you enter the real world. And education's a lifelong process. Not a single day goes by that I don't learn something new that fascinates me. And what education should do is to make you enliven your curiosity. It should show you that the world is so complicated that you will never be able to understand it all. And that's okay. And it's okay to go into things saying, I don't know. What always upsets me and perturbs me is that I know I would say a lot about the law, but even I know that I know maybe 5%. And because I know 5%, I'm looking over the edge and I see this 95% chasm that I don't know about. And it's people who know like 0.001% think they know it all.
Yes.
And they say that these things with confidence that are not only wrong, but they're confused. And when you try to correct them, they believe their ignorance and your experience are the same, which is always, it's one of the unique things in law that I think happens. Like you would never go to a helicopter mechanic and the helicopter mechanic says, okay, I'm going to tighten this bolt, which keeps the rotors going. And they go, well, no, I saw a movie about the helicopter. You should do this instead. Like you would never think to do that because you want that helicopter to fly. You wouldn't want to be the person getting behind the wheel of that helicopter. But in law, because people have seen a podcast or they've seen a movie, I mean, the amount of times people quote plead the fifth under Australian law, it's like a totally American thing. It's got no relevance to Australia.
Law and order.
Yeah, you see it in a Dick Wolf show, and you think you quote it. So it's that appreciation of things being complicated and that being okay that I think university needs to do more of a job to train into people. It's not just being job ready, because you'll never be job ready ever. Every single day you make it up. Being in a job or being an employee, being an entrepreneur, being a professional, it's jumping out of a helicopter or plane and assembling your parachute while you fall. That's all that it is.
And that's the biggest life skill, especially we've learned in the last 2 years, right? Is how to be flexible, how to pivot, how to adapt. And I think those skills, I have this, like I left school, flunked year 12, I backpacked around Australia. I was going to be work in hospitality for the rest of my life and meeting people when I was traveling, predominantly people from the UK who'd finished their degree and then they're having their gap year. I started to think maybe it's time I do get formally educated. And I went back and completed a degree in economics. God knows how, but I love economics. It's visual. You move one graph and it tells a story, right? And but what I find is that there's a huge gap in the market between people who are delivering the education and the practitioners. And I think, especially the next generations coming through, to engage them better in education, we really have to think about putting the practitioners in the classroom rather than the people who just write the literature.
I think that's right. And I'll take my discipline of law, for example. Law is not an academic discipline if you're going to do it correctly. And what I mean by that is we're not architects, we're actually carpenters. So when you're a lawyer, it's less useful to know that, okay, there's this doctrine of promissory estoppel that in 1851 said this, that, and the other. What's more useful is, hey, I'm about to lose my house. How do we stop this? Okay, we need to do a promissory estoppel case. How do I draft that? What does that look like? And it's those practical skills that are missing. I think medicine does this the best of any of the disciplines because they appreciate that you spend 6 years learning about the body and then you go into a hospital and for 5 years you just hammered with stuff, taking your education and changing it into skills. That link is missing, I think, largely around the world. And it's the failing of formal education in doing so, because education and skills need to go hand in hand. Apprentices, tradespeople, they do it really well, but formal education often lets people down.
I've just given up delivering accredited courses in business and leadership and jumped into my own because I was delivering 50-page business plans that were written 25 years ago when social media wasn't even alive. And they're talking about, the demographics rather than the psychographics of their customers, where they live online. I even went to a workshop by one of the biggest female entrepreneurs here in Sydney about 5 years ago. And she brought in somebody from Telstra who gave us a workshop on don't think that putting your branding on buildings is dead. And I'm like, don't waste your money on social media. I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is just 10 young entrepreneurs threw money at this workshop thinking it was the golden ticket. And the same as in education, I just think that they're going to find in higher ed, if they're not bringing in the practitioners who've given real life examples, then they're going to lose a lot of students ongoing.
I think that higher ed is really starting to feel the pinch, because what they used to do is provide the information, and the information is available now in a much more digestible format than it was ever available. Like, if you jump on YouTube, you jump on Khan Academy, jump on lynda.com, jump on any of these platforms, and you will learn so much more, so much quicker than, say, a 3-month degree or 6 months degree, whatever. You will absolutely master the content because it's given in a much more innovative, direct way. And unless higher education changes its perspective, because it used to be you get a degree, you get a job. There's no guarantees anymore.
No.
In fact, having a degree may be a prerequisite to certain professions, but even professions like law, like mine, even if you've done the degree and you get the certificate, there may be no one who will hire you to transfer your experience into skills, which causes a huge problem. So it needs to evolve, and I don't think it has. And I think that it's going to slowly have to realize that that's the way. Otherwise, it will die.
Well, look at you, right? You're an entrepreneur. You're a partner at Executive Legal, right? Who would ever think of a lawyer as an entrepreneur? That was never a...
That's right. And it's funny because I'm very blessed in that I get to do the things that I like, and I get to work in the way that I like and that agrees with me. This was not possible even so far as 30 years ago. Having a platform, having a discussion, understanding that niching, understanding marketing, and it's evolving so quickly. There's no way any course can keep up. Just something as simple as, all right, let's make a post on social media. Well, LinkedIn has its own way that it likes content delivered. It's very different to how YouTube likes it. It's very different to how TikTok, and very different to Instagram, even to the point of, if you filmed a video, if you're going to upload it on Instagram, it better be square. And if you're going to upload it on TikTok, it better be vertical. Those nuances, those hyper nuances in execution, if they're not appreciated and done, you can have the best branded message, it will never get out there. And it's understanding those things that has taken the largest part of my time. I mean, the marketing science, the understanding. I used to think you have a good product, you talk about it. Now I've realized I give all the information away for free. I will tell you about it in videos. I will tell you about it in podcasts. I'll tell you about it in blogs. All the information's free. What I sell is access. And right. I sell access to solving your problem through the methodology that I have shown you. And if it's too hard for you to do, come and I'll hold your hand through it. That's the paradigm shift that we are experiencing in 2021.
And you're an expert in your field. And that's what people are like, oh, you're giving your content away for free. I do 5 posts a week based on, dynamic business structure and strategy, and how, things that the ideal client and all of that crap that sits on social media through other business coaches. And people are like, you're giving all this away for free. And I'm like, that's right, because it should be free. What they're coming to me is helping me hold their hand to create a concrete structure, and everything else is showing my knowledge.
Absolutely, and that's what happens, and a lot of people don't get that now. The old paradigm that really died in the early 2000s, or even a little bit later, is okay. You go, you pitch to the client. You, in pitching to them, show them that you are competent. You establish rapport and trust, and in that process, you exchange knowledge. And you give them access, and over time, they pay you first, then they learn as they go. That model, I don't think exists anymore. Yeah. Now it is, you give every piece of information upfront for free, and you tell them, if you want this information applied to your situation, that's when we have to start creating a relationship. And I think that's only going to accelerate as time goes on.
Definitely. And I think part of that is that you need to build trust before you ask for money, right?
Absolutely. Of course you do.
And that's what we're selling really through content, through online platforms, is we're selling trust that we're not going to take your money. It's not a cash grab. We love what we do. We are here to also, what we've done for ourselves is do for you. And no better way to show that is through content.
And look, I think that the new paradigm has its own problems, like the rise of the guru who knows nothing, or the emperor has no clothes. There's a lot of that. if you've got good camera mannerisms, if you've got you can sell yourself very well, that you can pretend you have expertise you don't. I've seen that as well, and I think that problem will continue to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are people who know their stuff back to front, but they just can't communicate it well. There's people who can communicate stuff really well, but they have no idea what they're doing. And it's really hard to strike that balance. I've always said self-confidence is important, but nowhere near as important as self-awareness. Self-awareness is everything. You need to understand your limits. And the amount of times I tell clients, I don't know how to do that, I don't know. That's, I think, the new skill and the new study, because it's very easy to grow a following quickly by lying, by cheating, by screaming, by giving away all sorts of positions, but that's not a long-term sustainable strategy.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important that, you understand that you are transparent. You are telling the truth, and it's a slow burn. Like, I think that's where most people want that instant, influencer status, rather than actually building that up slowly. And that's through delivering trusted content.
I've done so much content, and maybe one or two pieces have gone what I would say is close to viral. And people think, oh, you got so lucky that your piece went viral. Well, no, if you look at the quantity of content that I produce, the amount of time I've spent thinking about it, it's actually surprising that only two pieces went viral. When you really break it down, it's actually surprising that so few things did as well as I thought they would. And it's, I guess, that appreciation that, and also that you should be doing it because you like doing it. I like pulling out the camera and having a chat. I love it. I love speaking to people like you who are passionate, enthusiastic, intelligent, who know their craft really well, because it forces me to look at myself and say, well, how can I incorporate some of the stuff, she's doing? How do you look at the world through Katie's lens? And it's never about, I think, making a quick buck, because if it was, this is the slowest way to make money.
And I think part of that is knowing your strengths, right? I'm a terrible writer. My mum's a librarian, and she did editing for a job. And I write badly, but I'm really good on video. So, I know my strengths. I can talk, but my blogging skills aren't so great. So I either outsource my written content. A lot of the time I have a girlfriend who I outsource a lot of it to, and she writes for magazines and PR, and she's amazing. So I think knowing your strengths and seeing where you can outsource as well.
Aces in places, always play aces in places. If you're known for being I'm known for being quite articulate and pithy, and people seem to like the sound bites. So I produce a lot of sound bites. In writing, I'm actually very neurotic. So I write quite well, but it takes me so long to produce a piece that by the time I've produced a piece on, say, the COVID restrictions, by the time I produced a COVID restrictions piece, the first wave was done. You know what I mean? Like we well and truly, I'm only now writing about Meghan Markle's, claim to it's so far behind in the rearview mirror that I've realized I've got to stick to my strengths, which is making pithy sound bites.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to represent yourself online, that you can't be everywhere. So can I ask you, before we do go, because I know you've got to jump into a meeting. So what are the 3 top tips you could give anybody who's thinking about, whether they're thinking about starting a business because you've done that, or they're thinking about entering law? Where do they go? What's the best piece of advice you can give them?
Sure. The first piece of advice is that feelings are mentionable and manageable. And if you are able to have honest discussions with yourself, you'll have better discussions with other people. So really learn how to speak to yourself kindly, nicely, and learn that you have a range of feelings. You don't, and your feelings don't need to become your actions, which is, I know, is a very simplistic thing you would tell a 5-year-old, but I think it bears repeating, because 50-year-olds are just 5-year-olds with cars. So that's the first one. I think the second thing that I would say is that starting a business is like climbing a mountain, and if all you do is look at the top of the mountain, you will never start. Take the smallest step you can take today that will take you closer to that goal. So, you don't need to worry about your 5-year plan if you haven't even got an idea of what your business will do. So pick practical, meaningful steps to move the thing forward. And I think the third one is, it's better to have something that's 75% and done than it is to have something that's 100% and not done. Don't let analysis paralysis destroy your life. I'm prone to overthinking, and if it wasn't for outside pressures, I still wouldn't have delivered my first closing address in court. I would still be perfecting it and the wording of it. You have to just accept that 75 to 80% is as good as it will be so that you can produce something, and then edit it up as the work demands, but get something done.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Firstly, being in touch with your own emotions and understanding, that your feelings aren't necessarily your actions. That I'm a massive overthinker, and I could work 24/7 if I didn't have deadlines and things to get out, because I can overthink it. So for me, habits are imperative to me, and my get up time is 4:33 a.m. Don't ask me why, but it is. And I exercise every morning before I start work at 5:30. Do you have anything that you can pass on as a habit, or you do consistently, to ensure that you keep moving towards your goals?
Yeah, so I've got 5 things I try to do every day. I try to meditate. I try to make sure I get a great night's sleep, and I've got a sleep tracker that tells me how well my sleep is, and it's so finely tuned that if I wake up, I can tell you the sleep score, because I can tell off my own body, which took me a while to get to. I drink a ton of water, at least 2 to 3 liters of water. I definitely exercise, and I write. The first thing I write every day is what I'm grateful for. That's the first thing I do, and I find that I'm not always going to hit those 5, but if I hit at least 2 out of those 5, it's a pretty good day. It moves me closer up the mountain, because I think life is made up more of the little things you do than the big things. The big things, everyone thinks that's what it's about, and I don't think so. I think it's what you do every day that matters far more than the stuff you did once.
I love that. It's so true, because it is the small things that make the big things happen. So where can our listeners find you? Please throw us your handles.
Sure. So TikTok is Jahan Kalanter Official. It's Jahan Kalanter on Instagram, and I've got jahankalanter.com. So just jump on there. Stuff about my speaking, a lot of podcast stuff, all sorts of information. If you're interested in retaining us as lawyers, we're executivelegal.com.au. A lot of stuff about us online. Always happy to have a chat. Always happy to help if I can solve a legal problem.
Beautiful. Well, I thank you for your time, because I know it's billable. Hopefully I won't get that bill, but I do thank you. I know you're a busy man, and I love your content and what you're doing as well. So thank you so much.
No, I'm a big fan of yours. Thanks, Katie. You're the best.
Thanks, Dad. I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Amazing.
Good.
Thank you. You're the best.
Thank you.
With your permission, I'm going to run off.